On to part 3 of the birth of the Bill C-68. It's part of our law and order topic today. Cops began to investigate what had happened between the delivery of the Caucus Committee report on November 3rd and the unveiling of Rock's proposal 4 weeks later. Rock had vetted the package with the cabinet while the Prime Minister was away on his first Team Canada trip to China. So Chrétien had not had the opportunity to state his position. With no prime ministerial imprimatur on the package, cops stepped into the vacuum and spread the word that Rock had both misrepresented its substance and misled ministers by saying it was consistent with the Caucus Committee report. Cops approached Shaughnessy and sought her help in establishing that there was significant disconnect between the caucus consensus and the proposed legislation. Shaughnessy made a strategic calculation and concluded it was better to be with Rock than against him. If Rock was a rising star, Shaughnessy was ready to rise with him. Gotta love opportunism. Well, they actually go well together. Two weasels, one in a suit, one in a dress. And she could not overlook his influence on those coveted judicial appointments. See, here is where the disconnect comes in. Instead of standing by your colleagues, she threw them under the bus to further her own ambitions. I realize politics is a blood sport, but it's more than just your colleagues. You threw 7 million people under the bus. To continue, she told cops she didn't see any major discrepancies. Then she warned Rock that cops was agitating against him. Backed with the rural MPs, she also indiscreetly flagged the simmering fight to at least one reporter in Ottawa. When word reached the PMO that a story could appear, officials there cautioned Shaughnessy in no uncertain terms that she had breached a cardinal rule of team discretion. She shrugged off the reprimand. "I'm not going to shut up just because they tell me to," she told a reporter friend. In deciding that she would be Rock's accomplice, Shaughnessy earned some valuable points with the Justice Minister. But the episode did nothing to build her friendships within the cliquey and leaky Liberal caucus. Footnote: she didn't rise very high in her career. Her career was actually cut short due to her untimely and unfortunate death on the House of Commons. On the floor of the House of Commons. She had a massive brain hemorrhage and unfortunately died as a result of. At the end of it, a lot of people did not have a positive feeling about Shaughnessy. Well, who would? She's basically just another weasel. Iftity said Nault and Iftity began to steer clear of her. They and other rural MPs decided that the only way to fight Rock and the prevailing forces on gun control was to keep talking about it. "We kept this alive for 6 months, Nault said. We kept at least 6 to 10 MPs on their feet at each caucus. At every available opportunity, these MPs would stand up and accuse Rock of turning his back on the caucus consensus." The gun control debate moved from proposal to legislation in early 1995. On February 14th, Rock introduced Bill C-68 in the Commons. The next few months would test the Liberals as nothing else had. This single issue moved them from soaring 80% in approval ratings to low 50s. I think here I'm just going to bring a close to this and begin with a bit of editorial, off-the-cuff editorializing. Fact of the matter is that gun control in Canada is not a unanimous subject. In fact, it is highly divisive. The number of firearms out there is still rather nebulous. The fact of the matter is that less than 2 million Canadians complied with the firearms scheme. The remaining 5 million firearms owners out of the 7 million basically went underground. Basically said, what guns? A vocal number arose out of the unregistered, unlicensed firearms owners and formed two organizations. One, the Law-Abiding Unregistered Firearms Association, LUFA, and the Canadian Unlicensed Firearms Owners Association, CUFOA. CUFOA had launched several challenges, actually went out of their way to try and get arrested. Instead, they had their firearms seized on a rather nebulous point, Section 117 of the Criminal Code in the Firearms Act, which, if they were deemed to be a threat to public safety or the public peace, the police could take away their guns without warrant or without justification other than that. And there was no judicial review of it offered. And when they have tried to challenge this rule, the judiciary has been rather complicit in upholding this draconian legislation. And the reason I say that it is draconian is that at the stroke of a pen, 7 million people were automatically criminalized. The only defense to this was getting a license and registering your firearms. I was one of the people that complied. At the time of when I complied, I figured, well, what could I do about it? As I understood it in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we did not have a clear right to have firearms. So it was basically left to the discretion of the yo-yos in Ottawa as to what we could have. Truth of the matter is after a time, I found myself financially embarrassed. My license had expired, and I backburnered it. There were more important things like paying my other bills and keeping body and soul together with food and everyday life. Well, I got a registered letter from the Canadian Firearms Centre. Surrender thy license and surrender thy guns to the nearest local police authority. I was horrified. What? Now my choice was do this or I would be charged criminally. So the first thing I did was I had to put that fire out. So I phoned the local chief firearms officer, which is with the Niagara Regional Police, and he told me exactly what to do. He said, first of all, send in your application, and that will stop any legal proceeding against you. Okay, great, did that. Because the type of license I hadn't planned on buying any more, and I took the free option of just getting the possession-only license. Well, Parliament had did away with the possession-only license. And I now had to bring myself into compliance with the legislation. The unfortunate part of it is that in order to get this license, I had to take or challenge the firearms safety course. I said to the firearms officer, but I'm ex-military. I've had small arms safety up to the gunnels, as it were. You know, the 5 years I was there, every year was small arms safety. Before every range outing, a recap of small arms safety rules, regulations. It says, hey, I was in the same boat. This is the chief firearms officer speaking now. I was in the same boat and I had to do the same thing. He says, all you got to do is pay the fee for the test and challenge it. Sounds like you could pass it. So that's exactly what I did. Got into compliance. I further did research. I was actually listening to the radio, and Dave Tomlinson of the National Firearms Association was on, and he actually said we do have a constitutional right to keep arms. It could be found in the English Bill of Rights. Well, that's all I needed. So off I went. I began researching. And researching I did. And indeed, over time, I discovered that not only is the English Bill of Rights a part of our Constitution, it is used regularly in the courts to justify other things. Now, this is a 300-year-old document, and there's another 300-year-old document that's just as much a part of it. So I've got a body of case law citing both the Act of Settlement and the English Bill of Rights for other things other than firearms. Now here's the thing. Why is it that the judiciary is refusing to acknowledge our right? Well, the short answer is that they were all at one time members of the Canadian Bar Association. The Canadian Bar Association has a standing policy to support any and all gun control measures. Now, this is where a strange case of judicial activism comes into play. Usually judicial activism is used to overthrow a law or to strike down a law where the judiciary inserts its own personal feelings. Now, there's judicial activism, then there is judicial deference. And this is where judicial deference is, where the court says, yeah, it's an infringement, but Parliament has the right to do this. And they basically do the acrobatics legally and judicially in case law and precedent to support it. That's called judicial deference, as opposed to judicial activism, which basically does the acrobatics to strike down a law. Well, here we have a judiciary that is doing acrobatics and judicial legal yoga to insert their own opinion, like their own feelings, to have their own type of judicial deference. It's kind of, everything's a hybrid here in Canada. We even have hybrid criminal offenses. And we have hybrid hearings and so on and so forth. But anyway, it's kind of hard to assert one's rights when you both have a parliament and a judiciary stacked against you. I was present in the Ontario Court of Appeals when the lead justice in the appeals case that I had become attached to, the lead justice basically said, the English Bill of Rights? Well, that was basically a protest, wasn't it? What's it got to do with this? When he said that, I knew right off the bat that our goose was cooked. No part of this law was ever going to be struck down. Despite the fact that we have the right enshrined in our Constitution. And see, that's, like I've said, I've covered this in other topics, in other videos. But at any rate, at this point in time, I'm going to, again, leave this information with you. My whole point is getting the information out so that people understand that, no, it is not a cut and dry issue. It is not something that we Canadians or we firearms owners are happy with. I know there are some people who do own guns and basically say, well, we got to have rules. And no, we don't want criminals or miscreants to have firearms. Well, that's fine. But you don't need the current firearms regimen to do that. As it stands now, thugs and gangbangers and so on and so forth go to court on firearms charges, and because they're not licensed, the rules that apply to us don't apply to them. And they're not, the rules are not slowing them down at all. The fact that it's a criminal offense, well, these people have, murder is a criminal offense, yet these people have determined to obtain a firearm off of the black market and use it to kill somebody. If they're willing to commit an offense against our most, for lack of a better way of putting it, sacred prohibitions, that of taking another human life, what makes you think breaking one of our more minor ones is going to slow them down? No, instead, it affected people that had no inclination to break law, to commit murders. But instead, it always gets sold either as a public safety measure, or in this case, as I've just related, a women's issue. You know, see, again, the whole thing is it comes down to women do not feel safe around guns. The operative word being feel. It's always about feelings. It's never about realities. I've heard my own wife say that, yeah, she's uncomfortable with me having guns in the house. It's a feeling. I've never once threatened her with a firearm. Never once made reference to the fact that I own firearms to her in any sort of threatening way. But she still feels uncomfortable. The only one that doesn't is my daughter. Because she's come to realize what utility there is with a firearm. And that utility is the defense of herself. And she came to find this out playing a video game. Yes, it was a zombie apocalypse, but indeed. without guns, you're pretty much done in the zombie apocalypse. So there you go. She's come to appreciate the fact or the function of a firearm. And to everybody that keeps on saying that firearms were made for one thing and one thing only, they were made to kill. Well, no, that is incorrect. The electric chair, the gas chamber, and for that matter, the hangman's noose were made to kill. A firearm was designed to propel a projectile at a target. It was the answer to the bow and the arrow and the crossbow. It took years of training to become a good longbowman, whereas it took virtual hours, a few short hours, you had a musketeer. It changed the course of battle of warfare. It more or less slowed down cavalry and heavy horse. Now horses would have to charge into a hail of musket fire. But the point of it is that there's always been in English law the belief that it is the crown that governs only by consent of the people. And it is the keeping of these arms that prevents the crown from becoming a tyrant. As English history has shown, especially in the 17th century, James I was a king that believed that he ruled by divine right, and he would not be told what he could or could not do, or what laws would be passed. He was also the one that decided that the common law could be overridden by statute. Needless to say, his son, raised by what he was his father's son, he brought about, and this would be Charles I. It came about that Parliament rose up and actually deposed him, put him on trial, and they executed him for treason. His son, after a short Republican period in English history, Charles II took office, and again, here we go. More divine right monarchy, which does not fly well in England. He did not live long enough to see any of his programs through, although he was trying to bring about what he called toleration between the religions. But again, his brother James the Catholic ended up stepping in. And it was under James the Catholic that rebellion did come about again. And it was known as the Glorious Revolution, largely because it was a bloodless coup. But apart from it being a bloodless coup, what ended up happening before that was a season of very repressive trials known as the Bloody Assizes. Anyone that was speaking against the crown was basically tried and executed. And believe it or not, it was when a woman was executed that the public took notice. and the public, the people, the subjects of the crown finally rose up and said enough was enough. James the Catholic abdicated, and before William of Orange, who married James's sister Mary, took the throne, the English Parliament had him sign and declare into law the English Bill of Rights. And believe it or not, there was also 2 battles that decided the fate of the Jacobites or the Stuarts. That would be the Battle of the Boyne I and the Battle of the Boyne II. And that is why the Ulster region of Ireland is still part of the UK, and which brought about more revolution because the rest of Ireland wanted Ulster back. But okay, I have prattled on long enough, and on behalf of the Freedom Pages, I wish everybody a good day.